Jim McCarthy, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. It's great to meet you and spend some time talking with you.
Well, it's great to have you here. We're going to be discussing your 2019 book, Live Each Day, a surprisingly simple guide to happiness, which sounds wonderful. We can all use more of that. But
Yeah.
before we get into that, let's start with your personal story.
Okay. Anywhere in particular you'd like me to begin?
Well, kind of like you did in your book, I think if you touch on your educational background and then the corporate work that you did, and then your health, and that.
Sure. Yeah. So at a high level, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and then I was fortunate enough to study in Vienna for a year. Had a chance to graduate from the University of Iowa, and then I studied in Germany for a year. Then I was an English teacher in Frankfurt for a couple of years in Germany, and then I moved to Spain and worked as a business journalist in Madrid for a couple of years. And then after that, I came to the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area in 1991. So, it feels like a lifetime ago. And worked in
That's where I,
various.
by the way, you probably know that I'm about an hour north of San Francisco.
Yeah, you're up in Sonoma, right?
Yes, yes, that's right. So let me just ask you, it seems like you had a very varied beginning. What does that say about you? There's something about your personality in there, I think.
Yeah, I think I learned early on to be curious, and my parents loved travel, especially my dad. And so as kids, we didn't do any sort of extravagant international travel the way a lot of younger people do today. But I got a taste for travel and loving that. And then I always loved history and political science. And so when I had a chance to study and do a junior year abroad in Vienna, I jumped on that opportunity in 1984, 85. And at that point, I think that's really where my whole world kind of opened up, right? Coming from Omaha, Nebraska, to go from there to the University of Iowa to Vienna
I can
was
imagine.
really pretty mind blowing. And I think what I learned was that you could travel and really experience the world and enjoy life without having to have a lot of money. You need a little money, a little bit
Yeah.
of money, but and it helps to not have a ton of student loans and that kind of thing. Uh, but but with even a little bit of money staying at youth hostels and traveling really frugally, you could have a pretty fun experience and adventures. And then I got a job teaching English in Frankfurt, which was didn't pay a lot, but I really enjoyed doing that and living in Germany and improving my German. And then I moved on to Spain from there.
How did these international experiences change your worldview, if at all, or your view of the U.S. in relation to the rest of the world, et cetera?
Ah, well, it dramatically changed the way I looked at the world in many ways, and I've never kind of recovered from that. I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to learn how people in Germany or in Austria and Northern Europe thought about things. But then I traveled to Spain and Italy and saw a very different kind of approach towards life, which I actually write about a little bit in my book about the sort of Northern European Protestant kind of approach towards work ethic. And I know these are huge generalizations, but I also, as a huge generalization, saw people in France and Spain and Italy working hard, but also playing hard and really enjoy themselves a lot, not getting too stressed out about things, um, uh, working to live rather than living to work.
Mm,
And I've always kind of had in the back of my mind that things can things can be very good from a work perspective. But if you're always working and you're a total workaholic and you don't know how to step back and enjoy yourself, that can have some dire consequences, both in terms of how much you enjoy every day or every week or every month, but also perhaps impact it can have on your health, both physically and mentally.
right. Okay, so then moving along, you returned to the U.S. at some point and began a different kind of career.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was in Spain, I was thinking, gosh, I think what I'm going to do, I'm tired of being poor. Is this, Europe has been fun, but I've been here for 6 years. I want to earn a little bit more money. I want to get more serious about my career. And so I figured I'd go back to the U.S., work hard, get some sort of corporate job, and then try to get into the best business school that I could. And fortunately, I was lucky enough to get into Stanford for business school back in 1994 and graduated there in 96. And then in 97, I went to Yahoo as employee number 258, which was a
That's
fine
early.
time.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's early, I guess, right?
Pretty good. I mean, someone the other day described me as like almost a co-founder. I said, no, 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 that's not at all. No, I don't deserve that kind of credit. But it was great to go there. It was really fun. I was very, very blessed to have that opportunity uh, because it was just a cool place to be, working with smart, talented, hardworking people, and having a great impact on a really revolutionary new industry. So that was very fortunate in going to Yahoo, and pretty much for the 20 years after that, I worked at different internet companies.
Yeah, yeah. Yahoo. So what was your position at Yahoo? What were you there to do?
So initially, my job was senior product manager, senior producer, actually, which is kind of like a product manager for Yahoo Classifieds. And from that, we created Yahoo Personals, Yahoo Autos, Yahoo Real Estate, Yahoo Careers. And these are all parts of the internet that have become very big in their own right, whether it's online dating, whether it's selling stuff online, whether it's finding a job online, real estate. These are all huge industries all in their own right. And honestly, I mean, we lost the battle to many companies that were very focused on different aspects of either real estate or careers or whatever. But we played a role in developing the usage of the internet and for people to use those products. So that was one of the things. I also worked on international rollouts for Yahoo auctions around the world, Yahoo Shopping, e-commerce. So this is 1997 to 2001. So before social media, before YouTube, Google was just starting to really pick up some speed at that time. But it was fascinating. I consider myself very
Yeah.
lucky to have been part of that experience.
Something about that strikes my funny bone is that you wanted to get serious about your business life, and so you go to a place called Yahoo, which which is an immature sounding name. We used to call people Yahoos who were,
Yeah.
who were out of it.
Yes, yeah. Well, the company had a sort of irreverent approach, and I've blogged about this before. That I once wrote a blog post called "The Hippie Values That Made Yahoo the Coolest Company in the World."
Yeah.
And it's funny because for someone today looking at that, if they even remember who Yahoo was, um, it's not so obvious. But at the time, the company had a very sort of funky, irreverent, kind of almost Grateful Dead approach. And from where you are in Sonoma, Dave, you probably know a lot of the early Deadheads were some of the first online communities of the internet. So it's not random. There's this DNA in the internet which is very anti-authoritarian, community driven, but very innovative and kind of do your own cool thing. And that's part of what Silicon Valley has traditionally had as part of its DNA. I think that's less and less the case today, but if you look back at the internet from, let's say, the very roots, let's say the 1980s into the 90s, that was quite a fascinating aspect of the web.
Yeah, I got very into it in the 1980s, very excited about it. Got involved in market research just so that that was a way in to kind of participate in what was going on. And you're speaking of the irreverences, reminding me of a company that was called Kentucky Fried Computers. Uh, Later became North Star, which no longer is around, but they were a very strong leader for a while.
I
As
see.
happens in Silicon Valley, things can turn over very, very quickly.
Right.
So now another significant milestone that you touch on in the book is you had a major health challenge. Tell us about that and what the impact of that was on your life.
Yeah. So on February 5th, 2013, my doctor called me up and told me I have cancer. And, I was sitting in the car. My shiny blue BMW convertible in a strip mall in Mountain View in the heart of Silicon Valley. And I hear him talking about surgery and radiation and survival rates.
Wow.
And it really freaked me out. I mean, I went home, I cried for a couple of hours. I called my mom and dad and my brothers and sister, drank almost an entire bottle of Kendall Jackson Chardonnay wine. And, um, and, then, um, and then I started writing in my diary. And out of me started pouring forth all these questions I had, because I had never really felt my mortality on a visceral level before. We all know we're going to die on an intellectual level, but this is the first time in my gut that I really realized that, the skin someday will be just as cold as the marble countertop where I'm sitting. So, in writing all these questions on the day I got my cancer diagnosis, I was asking questions. I think I wrote like 37 questions. I was writing questions like, who's going to be at my deathbed? How long am I going to live?
Mm.
What's my legacy? What are my regrets? What do I want to change? How are my relationships? What do I think about the work that I've done? If I live another 2 years or 20 years or 50 years going forward, what do I want to do? How do I want to live? And this was a real breakthrough for me. And then a couple of weeks later, I saw a friend of mine named Diane, who through Facebook, I saw that she also had cancer. She and I used to work together at Yahoo. She was the first head of corporate communications there. As a very smart, successful woman. And we get together for lunch in Los Gatos in Silicon Valley. And I say, Diane, I don't even feel like I'm in the same league with you. I mean, I have early stage prostate cancer. It's quite common in men. We decided to not even treat it yet because we don't even think it's the aggressive kind. And I said, Diane, you've got lung cancer. It's stage 4 when you found it. You've had a lot of chemotherapy. You've lost all of your hair. And I said, you've got a really serious situation. And she looks at me and she says, Jim, it doesn't matter whether you have 2 months to live or 20 years to live. When you get a cancer diagnosis, it changes your life. But then she went on to say, look, when I go to my son's lacrosse games and I see the blue in the sky and the green on the leaves, and I hear the laughter of the boys running on the field, I just have tears running down my face from the pure, simple, intense beauty of that moment.
Yeah.
And I wish we all could live like we have cancer.
Hmm.
Now, she obviously didn't wish cancer on you or me or anybody, the pain, the loss, the suffering, the heartbreak. But she wished that all of us could live so richly and deeply and intensely right here and right now.
Right.
And Diana's no longer with us. She passed away a couple years after she and I had that conversation. I am happy to report that her daughter, who's now 15 years old, so she was quite young when Diane passed away. Her daughter recently reached out to me and said, "Hey Jim, I saw this YouTube video. I'm sorry, I saw this this YouTube video of your TED Talk called What Cancer Taught Me About Happiness." And I'm talking about my friend Diane in that video. And so the daughter, Skylar, she reached out to me and said, "Hey, Jim, I don't know who you are, but I guess you used to know my mom and I'd love to learn more about her."
Uh,
So I'm very happy that I could, and she's a very nice young woman, very mature. And I was able to talk to her and said, this is how I knew your mom. And she was a wonderful lady. And she said, yeah, that's what my mom always told me. Like, enjoy the moment, enjoy the journey. We don't know how long we're going to live. And it's a beautiful lesson that this woman with lung cancer had to share with her daughter, who at the time was only like 12 or 10. And it's a great lesson for all of us.
yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. One of my sons actually got a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis and survived. Came through
Oh,
with chemotherapy, and I guess I don't recall if there was radiation or not. But somehow he dodged that bullet, and as a result, became a nurse and then a nurse practitioner.
wow. Well,
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that he got through that. May I ask, David, how did that kind of experience shape his life?
Well, it shaped it. Uh, do better to ask him, I suppose. But he's uh, he's a very loving guy, a very open and free thinking young man. And he then faced another challenge sometime later, much later than that, where uh, he got some, I don't still fully don't understand, but facial nerve pain
Mm,
due perhaps to a dental procedure sent him into a real tailspin. This was after he was already a nurse. He was doing well, and he became extremely depressed, didn't want to see any of his vast network of loving friends, became really reclusive. The thing that pulled him through was he was a member of Kaiser Health
mm,
System,
mm,
and somebody there suggested a treatment with ketamine, which is a new kind of thing that's being used to treat facial pain, but also depression. And I don't know which category to put him in or whether it's both. But the ketamine infusion of 24 hours. So it was like a drip,
mm.
and it's absolutely transformative. Brought him back to his old self, and he uh, he works in the HIV area, and is having a wonderful career.
Wow. Well, fantastic. I mean, whatever works, right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, he's training to be a trip sitter. That is for people who he's looking into the future when psychotherapy with various psychedelics are likely to become legitimized. There's research in that area right now that I'm very
Mm.
fascinated in, and he's gotten aboard that train trying to get ready to ride it. So,
A
so
trip sitter, so helping
yeah,
someone guide them through a
exactly,
psychedelic trip.
exactly, yeah,
Wow, that sounds great.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's his happiness journey. Now, how did you get into doing these happiness workshops? I mean, in a way, I can infer from what you told us, but let's hear your version of it.
Yeah, so after my cancer diagnosis, and thinking about my legacy and the work that I was doing, and I was between jobs at the time, and I thought, well, I've always wanted to be a motivational speaker. Uh, I've always loved being able to share stories with people, and I loved when I was a teacher, and I loved when I was a journalist, and when I was a manager, I loved also explaining and coaching people. So I thought maybe I can take my experience of getting my cancer diagnosis and share that with other people, and that evolved into the happiness workshops that I've been giving to different audiences for corporate retreats or keynote speeches or whatever. That's what I've been doing really ever since. I've done that in the US and internationally. And my
How many
workshops
years has
are,
that been now?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry,
How many years has that been happening now?
pretty much since 2013, since the year of
Okay,
my cancer diagnosis.
yeah,
And the format of the workshop is I mean, a lot of keynotes or sort of nice inspirational speech, and then people just walk away and, maybe something sticks or maybe it doesn't. But what I did is I took some of those questions that I wrote the day that I got my cancer diagnosis. Right, uh, if I were to die today, what would be my legacy? How would I feel about the relationships that I have? What would I say? What would other people say about me? Uh, uh, how do I feel about the work that I've done, and what kind of an impact have I had, and how fulfilling has it been for me? And then also going forward, what do I want to change? What do I want to change in my personal life? What do I want to change in my professional life? And that's part of the format of the workshops that I've done. And then I took a lot of what I learned from the many workshops that I've done, and then I uh, brought it into my book, which, as you mentioned, is called Live Each Day, a surprisingly simple guide to happiness. And as the title indicates, it's more than just inspiration, but it's really kind of a blueprint or a cookbook or a format or a roadmap for scientifically proven ways that you can boost your happiness. So not just kind of fuzzy, nice ideas, but really backed up with a ton of scientific research.
yeah. I'm really struck by those 37 questions that you sat down and wrote. And again, that says something about your personality or your background or something. It
Hmm.
sounds like there was some sort of a rather unique driving force there. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, hmm. So I'm very extroverted, as you might have noticed. My wife says I talk too much some of the time, but I love to share the ideas that I have, and I think, I don't know if I'm a Libra, so I don't know if that means I'm like a left brain, right brain kind of guy, but I think I can think very creatively, but I think I can also be very analytical.
Yeah,
And
what
so,
strikes me about that is something about being very methodical. Would that
yeah,
rise you?
yeah. I think I was that way before, and then living in Germany, the Germans are very structured, and that's great for a lot of things. And then there's other cultures, and again, these are huge generalizations, um, that are wildly creative. In fact, I think I'm very structured, and my wife is this very creative person, and there could be a lot of friction there sometimes in terms of, um, honey, you're over planning this, or we need to plan this more, or why don't we be more spontaneous? But if both sides realize that there's a strength in that dynamism, that
Yeah.
there's these incredible synergies that can happen from the order on the one hand, and then the spontaneity on the other. That can be great. And so I don't know. I was writing all sorts of questions. It wasn't just about work. It wasn't all just about relationships. Uh, and these things, they complement each other in many ways. And I go into different sorts of frameworks for happiness, which I'd be happy to go into detail if you'd like.
Yeah, well, one of the things you promote in the book is having a good work-life balance. And you seem to be practicing what you preach because currently you're actually in Bordeaux, France, right?
I
Is
am,
that where you are
yes.
now? Yeah.
I'm in
And
Bordeaux, France, yes, in an
y-
Airbnb.
yeah, and you are on a world trip with your wife.
I am now. I'm continuing to work in terms of arranging workshops or speaking engagements, and promoting what I'm doing, including the book on social media. But it's true. I got to a point where I decided that, uh, I can do this work internationally. I can do this work from anywhere in the world that I'm in. And as you know, San Francisco, where I have been living up until now, it's an expensive place, and pretty
Yes.
much any yeah, and so anywhere you go is cheaper than staying in San Francisco, pretty much. And so I can work just as many hours per week if I want to, here in Bordeaux, France, as I was in San Francisco or elsewhere. And honestly, this is part of a bigger trend for people being these sort of digital nomads, living in Airbnbs all over the world, which is perhaps the next book that I'll write, or maybe I'll start doing drafts on that as I'm on the road. But yes, in terms of work-life balance, uh, I think that there's many things I could say about that. But one is, uh, you might be familiar with Dan Gilbert, who is a psychology professor at Harvard, and he has a wonderful quote, which I mentioned in the book, which is, he says, "We're happy when we have family, and we're happy when we have friends. And pretty much everything else we do is simply to get more family and friends."
Uh,
And it's such a beautiful, simple, kind of funny quote. And when you think about it, so many of us, we get wrapped up on, I study hard to get into a good university, to get a great education, to get a great job, to make a lot of money, to buy a nice house or a nice car, or have this status and respect. And it's very easy to lose track of, well, why am I doing this anyway? And it
yeah.
usually comes back to, I want to love somebody. I want people to love me. Maybe I want to start a family with someone. Maybe I want to raise children. Maybe I want to have a community that I call my friends. And if you remember that and put that sort of first and foremost in your life, then it can perhaps help you reprioritize how you live your life. And, I could, after I got my cancer diagnosis, I could have looked for another intense, workaholic kind of job in Silicon Valley and work the long hours. But I do think that in part my cancer diagnosis in part was as a result of the very, very stressful work situation that I had, honestly, for many years leading up to that moment.
So was
And
the cancer then sort of a wake-up call that brought you to this awareness of needing a different kind of lifestyle?
it was a wake-up call, and the wake-up calls can mean different things. A wake-up call in my case was, uh, I don't want to go back to working 24/7 the way that I have in the past. It was also, I was 49 years old at the time I got my diagnosis. I'm 55 right now. And 49 is not so old, but it's not so young either. And it's like, maybe I need to slow down or pick some sort of a work or career that I love that I'm doing, and is not such a burnout kind of thing. And then finally on top of that, I think there's plenty of people who could work less or even retire if they wanted to, and they're kind of scared to even do that. They just kind of keep cranking along on the same conveyor belt rather than saying, well, let me think creatively for a second. Do I have to be working in the rat race in whether it's in New York City or whether it's in San Francisco or Silicon Valley or LA? Or is there another lifestyle I can have? Maybe I don't have the status, maybe I don't make as much money, but wow, I'm living really well. And maybe I'm not working 70 hours a week, maybe I'm working 30 hours a week or 40 hours a week or 10 hours a week. But guess what? I think I can afford this. I think I can enjoy doing this. And uh, and that kind of harkens back to my bohemian days of traveling when I was a student, and I realized you could live a great life and not need to have a ton of money.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does. And you're a great role model. And I ask myself sometimes, even if this podcasting thing, am I in a rut? I've been doing it for 15 years. Do I need to jump out of that or change, maybe travel around the world and do it like you're doing? I, I could do it from other locations. It doesn't have to be done from my home. So that may be something I need to discuss with my wife at some point. Uh,
Yes,
we have family.
yes. Well, and
My son.
I'd be happy to chat with you about that as well, David.
Okay, wonderful. One of the things that you say in your book is that happiness is a learned skill. And I think most of us sort of sit around in some ways either chasing it, on the rat wheel, whatever you call it, the the cage. What's that called? I'm blocking on the word.
Well, yeah. There's the rat race. There's the what is that called? I can't. It's
There's
not
a
the
term.
Ferris wheel. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
at any rate, uh, yeah, either we chase it or we just kind of think that it'll happen by accident somehow if we just, that'll come to us somehow. So talk about how is it a skill? You say it's a skill.
Yeah.
A learn.
So when uh, I thought about initial titles for my workshop, there was like "Work, Life, and Death in Silicon Valley," a survival guide, or um, you know, the happiness workshop, how to find your happiness. And then as I got deeper into it, people started raising their hand in the workshop and saying, wait, Jim, okay, you're talking about mortality. You're talking about your legacy. You're talking about live like you have cancer. We're going through all these writing exercises. Great. We're having discussion. That's cool. But they asked about what is happiness. And then I started doing research on that, and we can go into more detail on that. But then I also realized that there's there's daily practices you can do that are simple, that are scientifically proven to reduce your stress, boost your confidence, help you live in the moment. And basically those four practices, there's a forgiveness practice to let go of the past and be in the now. There's a meditation practice to also be in the now and be at peace with what is, and not hung up on what's happened before, but also not freaked out with anxiety about something that might or may not happen in the future. The third practice is is positive thinking and affirmations to train your brain for success. And then the final one is a gratitude practice to appreciate all the amazing aspects of your life the way it is right now without changing anything. So those are the four practices that I talk about in the book, and every one of these have a lot of scientific underpinnings that I share. And then I teach people in the book how to apply every one of these practices into their lives in a very simple way every day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And of course, I've been following that literature as well. Very interested in the advent of positive psychology and some of these practices that came into prominence as a result. Um, One of the things that you do in your workshop is you, in the work domain, which is one of the big topics, is to help people find their calling. And I was struck by one of the exercises that you do there is you have people assess that from their deathbed. Because of your own experience, death plays a very prominent role in your happiness workshops.
Yeah, it's funny. It's maybe it's because I was raised Catholic that I have this sort of uh, uh, morbid sort of awareness of mortality. Of course, I studied in Vienna, which is said to be a culture which just loves death. But it's not even that, I don't think. But I think that if you really grasp your mortality, then you realize that your time is finite in this world. And I think that many people, they act like they're going to live forever. They just
Yep.
act like they're going to live forever. And you and I, we both know of people who've come down with diseases and they're dead within a year's time. I write about a friend of mine in the book. I write about a friend of mine named Mary, who wonderful woman, wonderful human being, and she was diagnosed with ALS, right, Lou Gehrig's disease, and pretty much within a year and a half, she was dead, and she and her husband and their children embodied so much love and caring and courage. It was just amazing. But it's shocking how fast that went. Let alone whether someone gets murdered on the streets, or whether it's in a car accident or something that can happen very quickly. So none of us knows how long we're going to live. But I think that when you face that mortality and you really feel it, and then I think that it can force a person to have a little bit more courage, be a little bit more proactive, to do what they've always wanted to do. So I ask questions like, if you had 5 years to live, what would you do? If you had to take a job and you were going to do it for the next 30 years, um, and you couldn't change jobs, what would you do? I mean, there's lots of different writing exercises that I do to help a person think creatively about what they want to do and what's purposeful and fulfilling. And I share some research from a professor at Yale, which shows that people can think of their work as a job, as a career, or as a calling. And the amazing thing, and a job is just for the paycheck, and a career is you take it seriously, you want to be successful, and a calling is really you feel like you have this sort of unique impact on other people, like you were born to do this work.
Right.
And the fascinating thing from the research is that it doesn't matter what you do, as long as how you think about your work is that way. And the example I give is people who are janitors in a school, and they don't view their work as just cleaning toilets. So they view it as keeping the school clean and hygienic for the children, so they can be healthy and they can be happy. And so doing something that is not very high on social status and not paid well is nonetheless for them a calling, because they think of it in a very beautiful way of how they're touching other people's lives. And the other way around, there's people that are heart surgeons who just view it as a paycheck.
Yeah.
So this is important because I encourage anybody to find greater meaning in their work, no matter what it is, whether they're an Uber driver whether they're a school teacher, whether they're a software developer, whether they're a stay-at-home parent. And if they find deeper meaning in what they're doing, then anything they can do could be beautiful. And that's one way to think about how to find greater purpose and meaning in your work, which is one of the very important pillars out of the two pillars that I have on my happiness framework.
You, I wonder if you ever read the book, and I'm blocking on the guy's name. It's driving me nuts. It's called Work or Working. Do you know that book? It was a bestseller some years ago. Whether you know it or not, one of the stories that's in there is about a guy who works. He's a grave digger,
Mm.
and but because he's a grave digger, they gave him a little cottage in the graveyard to live in. He had a couple of kids, and this famous journalist who went around interviewing different people about the jobs they had and their level of happiness and satisfaction and so on about that. And this guy was one of the happiest of all. and,
Ah,
and you would
really?
think, you know, you're a grave digger, basically you are somebody who digs holes, to put dead people in. How rewarding or inspiring is that? But his view of it was, I get to live in this like park, this raise my kids with beautiful green grass all around, and I have this lovely, distinctive little cottage there, and I feel like I'm the luckiest man in the world. So it's like
Beautiful.
kind of, yeah, it's how we position it, how we frame it in our mind that makes a difference. I wonder if there's any story that comes to mind of somebody who went through that phase of your workshop. I'm taking a chance here because I don't know if you'll have such a story.
Oh no, David. Let's see. Let's go with it.
Yeah, of somebody who kind of awakened and found their calling as a result of going through this kind of exercise in one of your workshops.
So I'm there's various different examples I could give. There are definitely people who've said that they've changed their work after going through my workshop. I know that I once gave a workshop for a small group of women who got together every month in San Francisco. And the woman who organized it, I saw her like 6 months later, and I said, "Hey, how's the group doing?" And she said, "It's great. About 2/3 of the women in the group, uh, no, let me say, about 1/3 of the women in the group quit their jobs after your workshop." I said,
I guess
"Really?"
that's
And she said, "Yeah, but they're all lawyers, so But I mean, that's the thing, is like they all hated their work.
yeah,
Smart, hardworking people, they hated their work, and they just thought, well, why am I even doing this? Life is too short.
yeah.
Now, I'll give you another example related to this. So the question about who's going to be at your deathbed. I did a workshop for the Harvard Club of San Francisco a few years ago, and later on, one of the women got back to me and she said, "Hey, Jim, I want you to know that." No, actually, she mentioned this in the workshop. She said, "Hey, I'm writing out about like my children and my grandchildren are going to be at my deathbed," and then I realized I don't have any children. and so that literally she said that night she went home to her husband and had a very serious talk with him, and they decided to start a family. And now she has two kids, and she said that happened directly result of me asking that question. It's a very simple question, imagine your deathbed, who's going to be there? And she realized there that she was really not on track to having that sort of outcome, thinking down the line 30 years, 50 years, 80 years, or whatever. She was really not on track for that.
Yeah,
And she was
that's a
very happy.
delightful example, as is your own life is a good example of that as well. Now you said that was one of the two pillars. I think it was work was one of the two pillars. What's the
Sort
other?
of, yeah. So thank you for asking. So when people started asking me about, Jim, okay, you talk about happiness a lot. What does it even mean? I didn't go to the dictionary to try to look up some sort of definition, but I went through a lot of different research on this, and and the framework that I give is basically the way I describe it, David, is this way. I said, imagine a day when you're on the beach at a beautiful resort with someone you love. You wake up in the morning, you do yoga, you have a great workout, fantastic breakfast. In the afternoon, you go to the spa, you hang out on the beach, or you do something you love, whether it's shopping or going to a nice museum, have a nice siesta, wake up, you have happy hour, great dinner, drinks, dancing, music, go back to your room at the resort, a beautiful night of romance with this person you love, and you fall asleep in each other's arms. And I say, okay, that's day one. Yeah, who would be happy doing day one? And most people raise their hand, right? I say, okay, now think about day two. Okay, day two, you wake up early, you guzzle your coffee, you've got a long commute, but you're a nurse in a skilled nursing facility, and you help people who are at the end of their lives, or maybe they're even in hospice, and you don't get paid a lot of money, but you see that your tender, loving care for these people who are elderly or who are ill or at the end of their lives, you're bringing a smile to their faces. You're having a beautiful, positive impact on them. At the end of the day, you pick up your kids at daycare, make them a quick dinner, help them get to bed, and then you go to sleep. No romance because you're a single parent. Okay, and I say, okay, so who would be happy with day two? And some people are like, oh, is this a trick question? And other people say, yeah, I'd be happy doing that, you know. And what I say is, day one is all about pleasure, and day two is all about purpose, pleasure and purpose.
Yeah.
And pleasure is great, and it's fun, and it's enjoyable, and it feels good, uh, and but often not very meaningful, right? And purpose is fighting for what's right, or directly helping people, or touching people's lives very directly, uh, helping out less fortunate people, working really hard on a great product or something, or a service that is helping people, helping a business grow. These are very different things.
Yeah.
And what I say is that in my happiness framework, the happiest life is one which has a blend of these things.
Uh-huh.
So it's not, because if you think about people as all pleasure, no purpose, right? Sitting on a beach, drinking mojitos, it'll be great for a while, and
Yeah,
then
I
eventually,
immediately went to boredom. I thought, well, how long do I have to do this?
right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, for a while it's great, and then after a while it's like, well, okay, I need to do a little bit more. I need to do something. Either it's exercise my brain more, or help people out more, or there's so much that is broken in our world that anybody who's smart and focused on helping other people, there's no lack of work and help and volunteering work that needs to be done. Now, on the other hand, I've had people in my workshops who started nonprofits in Oakland, California. And this one woman, she was, I don't know, maybe 28 years old. And she said, look, I started this nonprofit in Oakland. I've been doing it for 6 years. I am so exhausted and burned out that I have to just walk away from that and hand it off to other people, because I haven't had a vacation. I don't take care of my health. I don't get enough sleep. Right. And ironically, though, that she's basically saying I've got lots of purpose in my life, not enough pleasure.
Hmm.
Right. And, uh, and so what I encourage people to do when they think about their happiness, and the writing exercise that I have them do is, do you have too much pleasure, too much purpose, not enough of either? And I go through a whole framework on this. And if you can find something that is pleasurable and purposeful, that's ideal. Now, not everything's going to be that way. I think having a good meal and drinking some good wine, that is very pleasurable. I generally don't find it very purposeful. Studying hard for an exam, working really hard in order to get a degree, uh, really sacrificing, like changing diapers, that kind of thing, that can be very purposeful, not very pleasurable. But some of the best things in life are both. So, David, if you think about playing soccer with your kids in the backyard, or doing work that you find really meaningful, that's really touching people's lives in a great way, or maybe it's family reunions. These are things that are purposeful and pleasurable. Having amazing lovemaking with someone that you really love. I mean, these are purposeful and pleasurable things. So the best things in life are purposeful and pleasurable. And if we can kind of be aware of that, and actually there's a term for this, which is called being in the zone, right?
Yeah.
If you know, is it Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi? Right. Thank you.
Me high, me high is how I've been taught to say it.
I'm sure you got it right. So he talks about being in the zone. And when
Yeah.
you think about it, it's you're absorbed, you lose track of time. It is challenging. It's not too challenging, but it's challenging enough that you find it interesting and kind of hard, but you can kind of do it if you're really focused and you're really trying, and it's something that is meaningful and interesting and creative for you. And his advice for people to be happy in this situation is to try to get in the zone as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, for some people, being in the zone is doing podcast interviews, whether that's you or me, right? Or both of us. Sometimes it's writing software, writing code for software, which can be very complex and ornate and challenging and beautiful in a way. Sometimes it's playing with your kids. Sometimes it's reading or teaching someone how to read. Sometimes it's learning a foreign language. Sometimes it's cooking. It can be doing an Excel spreadsheet and doing financial analysis. And what I encourage anyone to do who's listening to this or who reads my book is to really think about what puts you in the zone and then try to do that as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, I had a powerful experience of that growing up. As a teenager, I got very interested in electronics and amateur radio. And
Ah,
uh, I lived, my bedroom was in what had been a laundry room attached to the garage, so away from the parental house.
yeah.
And I would just live in there or in the garage soldering and putting things together. And I would forget meals. My parents would have to come and drag me away from that stuff. And so I always think of that as being in the flow. The other is skiing, which I'm not able to do anymore. But you literally have the feeling of flow as you're flowing down the mountainside.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's beautiful that you've been doing this podcast, and that is a reflection of your passion for amateur radio. And
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of you can see
I
a relationship there. Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful.
yeah, yeah. Um, you talk about the power of creating good habits. Uh, Tell us some of your favorite habits.
Yeah. So in the book, I wrote about, oh, I don't know, 250 pages about thinking about work, thinking about relationships, how to improve the work you're doing, the relationships you're doing, and go through the whole thing on these different practices, right? The forgiveness, the meditation, the affirmations, the gratitude practices. And then I thought, well, if a person just reads this, okay, and it's nice. If they read it and they do the writing exercises and they come up with their own action items, okay, that's definitely better. But I wanted to make sure that people are able to actually implement the practices. And so I spent just a little bit of time, I don't know, it's maybe 10 pages, talking about how to implement good daily practices so that instead of saying, oh, I want to meditate, but I never do, or I want to do affirmations, but I never have time, I kind of go through how you can implement practices. Uh, and basically the idea is the thing about implementing a new habit is not so much willpower, it's about the reminder. It's the reminder to do that thing.
Mm.
And so one of the things is to just, whether it's putting in your calendar as a reminder, whether it's an online calendar or I'm not so sure who doesn't use an online calendar anymore, but putting on some kind of reminder of what is the habit that you want to do. So if you want to exercise every day and you want to do it first thing in the morning, then maybe you put your running shoes right next to your bed.
Uh-huh.
Right? Or if you want to start flossing all of your teeth and you keep on forgetting it, then maybe you put the dental floss next to where you make your coffee in the morning. So these are all these important reminders that is like, oh, now I remember to do this. And then once you have the reminder, then it's easy to do that. And then you can do some kind of a reward. Maybe it's like saying, "Yay, I'm awesome," which sends a message to your brain, which is a little reward for the thing that you did. Now I'll give you a separate example. So uh, more than 30 years ago, I started doing stretching and a little bit of yoga every morning when I woke up. I was actually staying in a youth hostel in Berlin at the time, and I woke up and some guy was doing all sorts of calisthenics, and I thought, that looks like a good way to start the day. So I started doing that, and then later, my wife said, "Oh, then later, I thought, you know, I want to add a meditation habit to my daily habits, a meditation practice." And I thought, well, okay, well, I kind of do some stretching and some yoga every morning. So how about once I do that, let me do meditation just for 5 or 10 minutes. And so it's easy to take an existing habit and then layer a new habit on top of that,
Uh-huh.
right? Once the existing one's there, adding the new one is really easy. And then after that, I thought, well, I want to do some positive thinking affirmations on top of that. And so after the stretching and the yoga, then I added the meditation habit, then I added the affirmations habit on top of that. And that was easy to do all of those things. And then later, my wife said, "Well, you need to do some push-ups as well." So I added push-ups to the whole routine. So you see, once you have one of these things, it's really easy to start layering them on. And uh, and I found that having a good habit like that is so important. And what I say is, I there's this separate section of the book called the Magical 1%, and it's not about people, but it's about time. And basically, 10 minutes is about 1% of your waking hours of every day, right? I did the math. I was thinking, well, if I did 10 minutes of meditation, affirmations, gratitude practice, forgiveness practice, what percentage of my waking hours per day is that? It turns out to be about 10 minutes is about 1% of
Yeah.
our waking hours every
Yeah.
day. So what I say is, if you David spent 10 minutes every day, and maybe you do this already, but if you spend 10 minutes a day in meditation, affirmations, gratitude, or forgiveness practice, what you can do is just sitting on the sofa or laying down on the floor or laying in bed, that 1 minute of the day will make the other 99%, my apologies, that 1% of the day will make the other 99% of the day a lot better, because of all the scientific research that I share in the book about the benefits of meditation, of affirmations, of gratitude and forgiveness. So
Yeah.
I call that the magical 1%.
Yeah, that's great. What what are some of your favorite affirmations, or what one or more affirmations have been most powerful in your own life?
So, every morning I wake up and, good morning, it's a nice day, it's a wonderful day, it's a lovely day. I'm happy to be woke up, I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy woke up, I'm happy to be alive. Today I'm the best husband for my wife. Today I'm the best husband for my wife. I forgive myself, I accept myself, I like myself, I love myself, I forgive others, I accept others, I like others, I love others. I deserve to be happy and do work that helps others. I deserve to be happy and do work that helps others. I deserve to enjoy the life that I have. I'm loving and kind to myself and others. Uh, there's so many, and part of the writing exercises or activities in the book is to help a person think through, what do you want to affirm? What do you want to say about yourself? And when I came to California and started working in sales almost 30 years ago, one of the first things the best salespeople I worked with said is, "Oh, you got to do affirmations. You got to keep yourself pumped up. You got to keep yourself positive." And at that time, that was just considered to be effective, but people didn't know. It sounded so hokey and so silly and so cheesy. But I did it anyway, and I realized it started helping. I'm closing this deal today. I'm closing this deal today. I'm closing this, or, I'm a student at Stanford. I'm a student at Stanford. That was my big dream, to be able to make that
Yeah.
happen. And
Yeah.
eventually it did happen. Now, in the meantime, through neuroscience, we've discovered what's called neuroplasticity, which I'm sure you're aware of. And that's how the brain reshapes its structure based on what you think about and how you think about it and how you frame it, basically. So you can use affirmations to train your brain for success. And this is something that nobody knew anything about when I started doing affirmations. and now it's scientifically accepted and proven fact. So affirmations are very powerful, and everybody should use them to think hard about what do they want to be true about themselves, and then repeat these affirmations to themselves every day in order to really train your brain for success. So otherwise, we have this negativity bias, which always sends us to the negative more than the positive.
Right, right. And so that kind of comes back to one of the first questions I asked you about, which is a skill that, how is it that happiness is is a learned skill? And that's
Right.
really speaking to that practice. So
Absolutely.
that probably would be a good place for us to wrap this up. What do you think?
Sounds great by me. But
Okay.
if I haven't said this, David, thank you so much for having me on your show. You've asked wonderful questions, and thank you for reading my book and featuring it. And I'm so grateful for you for the work that you do now, this interview, and for all the work you've done over the years. I have no doubt you've helped many people with the work that you do. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And so happy to have discovered you and the wonderful work that you're doing in the world and the wonderful example that you're setting for me and others. So, Jim McCarthy, I want to thank you for being my guest today on Shrink Rap Radio.